Hi, welcome back to our IELTS speaking lesson. My name is Kara, and in today's lesson, we'll be looking at part 3 of the IELTS speaking test. Specifically, we're going to look at different question styles and how to give a good speaking answer in part 3. But before we do that, let's quickly look what happens in the IELTS speaking part 3. Part 3 takes between 4 to 5 minutes, and you'll be asked about 4 to 8 questions. These questions are connected to the topic discussed in part 2, and they're usually more in-depth. Also, what makes part 3 different from part 2 is that the entire part 3 is a two-way discussion with the examiner. The examiner will first ask you questions, and based on your answers, the examiner will ask some follow-up questions. So really, the whole process is sort of like an interview. Let's take a look at what a question in part 3 might look like. Okay. Let's say the question you got in part 2 is like this. Since it is about electronic equipment, in part 3, the examiner will ask you questions related to electronic equipment. Here is a list of questions the examiner might ask you. First, the examiner will say, "We've been talking about electronic devices. I'd like to discuss with you a few more general questions relating to this topic. First, let's consider what are the most popular electronic devices in your country at the moment?" So this is the first question. Then the examiner is going to ask more questions that are also related to electronic equipment. For example, what devices do you think will be popular in the future? Do you think people spend too much money on electronic devices? In what ways can electronic devices make our lives harder? What would the world be like without computers? Should children be taught to use computers at school? So these questions are just an example of what you might encounter in part 3. They can be about the internet, about advertising, companies, so on and so forth. These questions can be anything. So if you're not a native speaker, part 3 questions can be very challenging. For that reason, I recommend you go to our website, bestmindtest.com/IELTS, to prepare for part 3 questions. On our website, you can find 50 common IELTS speaking part 3 topics. Each topic has 5 to 8 questions. If you can master all these questions on our website, you will definitely do a much better job at this part. All right, let's get back to the question. If you have prepared for the IELTS speaking part 3 before, you might think that these questions are a little unpredictable, and it's hard to prepare for them. However, if you look at them closely, you can see some patterns among the questions. Knowing these patterns will be really beneficial to you because you can structure the answers based on the patterns. So let's take a look at the patterns together. Generally speaking, questions in IELTS speaking part 3 will be structured like this. For example, give your opinion on a topic or express your preference about something. Let's take a look at some example questions. Maybe the examiner will ask you to give your opinion on a topic, such as, what's your opinion on companies checking job applicants' online profiles? Maybe they will ask you to express your preference, like, what do you think is better for you, home cooking or eating out? Maybe they'll ask you to talk about people or things in your country, such as, do people in your country spend a lot of money on their education? They can ask you to talk about causes and effects, such as, what are some of the causes of water pollution? Maybe you'll compare and contrast two things, like, what are the differences between living in the city and the countryside? Maybe they'll ask you to make a prediction on something in the future, like, what do you think cities will be like in 50 years? Maybe they'll say to make a comparison with the past, like, how are education priorities today different from those in the past? Or maybe you'll talk about a hypothetical situation, such as, if you could live in any city you want, where would you choose? Or maybe they'll ask you to provide solutions to a problem, such as, how can traffic be reduced in a city? So all of these question styles are what you could encounter in part 3. It's important that you prepare for these question styles if you want to do a good job. Now, I'd like to show you how to structure answers based on these question styles. Keep in mind that the answer structures we are going to show you are only to help your brain have a clear picture of what you want to say, so you won't feel nervous and your answer will be long enough and stay organized. However, you don't necessarily have to follow them as long as your answer is on topic and can showcase your English proficiency. Also, there is no set word limit for a good Part 3 answer, but it shouldn't be too short. Too short and you'll have failed to develop your answer properly. As a rule, to get a high score, your answer should be about 5 to 8 sentences. All right, let's get started. We will show you a sample question, sample answer, and a recommended answer structure for each question style. As you listen to the sample answer, pay attention to how the sample answer is organized based on the structure. You can also repeat what you heard or pause the video and practice by providing your own answer to the question. Now let's start with the first question style, making a prediction on something in the future.
I think cities in the future will be more densely populated. At the same time, people will still require transportation, so I think the transportation in future cities will be more modern, fast, and convenient. In fact, I think there is a growing trend across the world of futuristic cities emerging where transportation is becoming more convenient to meet the growing demands of the population. This trend will probably grow going forward. I personally like this trend as more futuristic cities will emerge. A good example of a futuristic city, I'd say is Tokyo, where people have access to clean transportation and live in compact spaces like high rises. In the past few decades, there have definitely been some noticeable changes in education through generations. Most notably, students today can no longer be punished physically by teachers, while in the past, that was pretty common. Another way that education has changed is teacher-student interaction. Today, it's more normal to see students answering questions and having discussions, while in the past, the teacher simply lectured, and the students listened silently. Overall, I think education is making progress in my country. For me, there are quite a few differences between life in the city and life in the country. Life in the city and in the country is vastly different. First of all, the way people interact with each other is different. For example, in a small town, people usually wave to say hello and notice strangers in town. Not in a big city. Most people ignore each other and try to give each other space in public. Another big difference between the two is the amount of noise, which is higher in cities and lower in small towns. Overall, life in both places varies. I think violence on TV is the most problematic for children. But there isn't really a simple way to make it stop because there is a demand for action, horror, and excitement on TV. The way I see it, there are two possible ways to deal with violent TV shows. The first is to make policies that actually ban that kind of programming altogether, although that would likely not be popular. The second way could be to educate people on why violent TV shows are problematic and see if they will stop watching the shows to lower the demand for them. I mean, either way, I think this problem probably isn't going to disappear with just one simple solution. Water pollution definitely has more disaster effects on our health. From what I understand, water pollution is caused mostly by human activity. So it seems like the likely source of water pollution would be factories, runoff from farms, sewage from cities. For instance, I've seen a few studies recently that declared the Australian Great Barrier Reef to be dead due to man made pollutants and garbage in the water. I think it's quite sad, as that probably could have been prevented if people paid more attention to the effects big industry has on the environment. As far as I know, watching TV is probably one of the most popular pastimes for people in my country. For example, in the evening, almost every home I pass has the TV in the living room switched on, and families will be sitting around together watching shows. I think most people like watching the news or watching dramas. As for me, I also watch quite a bit of TV when I'm at home. For instance, I watch sitcoms on Friday nights after work. I guess other people in my country probably do the same thing as I do.
Okay, I hope you found these answer structures helpful. Remember, these answer structures are only to help you give a clear and organized answer. As long as your answer is long enough and demonstrates your English proficiency, you'll be good to go. All right, we still have 3 more question styles to look at. Give your opinion on a topic, express your preference, or talk about a hypothetical situation. For these question styles, you can use the following structure to form your speaking response. First, answer the question. Then, explain the reason. Lastly, give examples to support your reasons. This is the structure we'll use for these question styles. Again, let's look at our examples.
If you ask me, yes. I think that some people spend too much money trying to keep up with the latest trends in technology. However, I can understand why they do it, because these days devices become obsolete almost immediately after they are purchased. For example, a new smartphone might have some great new cameras today, but tomorrow another one will appear with an even better camera. Then everyone will want to upgrade to the new device. As for me, I'm satisfied with using a slightly outdated device in order to save money until I really need a new one. Even though I love to read, the reality is I spend quite a bit more time watching TV. I think the main reason I watch more TV is because it's lazier, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, there are some great shows to choose from. For instance, one of my favorite shows is Dexter, which has great writing and interesting plot and well-developed characters, just like a book. I think in the age we live in now, TV is just going to keep getting better and better, so I'm probably going to continue watching more TV. If I could change the world with my writings, my biggest priority would probably be to educate people about how and why they need to make changes to what they buy, what they eat, and consume to help save the environment. The main reason is that people nowadays are using so much disposable plastic in products that this has led to many environmental problems. If my writing could change our consumption habits, that would have a drastic effect on our environmental footprint. For example, I've seen a few studies recently predicting that by 2050, the mass of plastic in the world's oceans will exceed the mass of all the fish that live there. If that happens, the entire food chain will be severely damaged.
Okay, that concludes today's video. I hope what we have taught you today helps you have a better idea of how to prepare for IELTS Speaking Part 3. But the secret to getting a higher score in Part 3 or the entire speaking section is all about practicing speaking. Again, I recommend you go to our website and practice questions we have prepared for you. If you don't know what to talk about, you can look at or listen to our sample answers. You can also find a speaking partner and practice the entire speaking section together so you are fully prepared. In upcoming videos, I will talk about common English phrases, idioms, and vocabulary that you can use in your IELTS speaking answers. If you can use these phrases in your answers that usually only native speakers use, it will show you can talk just like a native speaker. And that is really important grading criterion in IELTS speaking. Okay, the upcoming vocabulary videos will be categorized by topics. So the next video will be about useful vocabulary for answering questions relating to the topic of travel. So make sure you stay tuned in and don't miss it. Thank you and see you soon.